I've been sitting with God trying to understand this fifth trumpet plague, what I know from Scripture, and now what does He want to show me in real time that is happening? Because I do know the times, I do know what I've been doing, and I know what He's taught me in Scripture. Now I just need Him to show me how this is happening in the world. How is He revealing this? So what I've taught you about that fifth trumpet plague in Revelation 9 is, number one, it's going to come on those who do not have the seal of God. It is an army of locusts, or an army like locusts. They are wearing something like crowns of gold, meaning that they have been given authority. Their faces resemble human faces. They are human. Their hair is like women's hair. We know what that means based on what Paul told us, that women's hair is a covering, given to her as a covering. These people are wearing coverings, not because coverings are commanded, but because they make up their own human rules and traditions. They go around wearing coverings on their heads. And their teeth are like lion's teeth. So they are rebellious, they are obstinate, they are devouring. Remember that the word says, she roars at me like a lion, therefore I hate her. Now, who's the persecuting power of the end? The persecuting power of the end is the image of the Antichrist, with the false prophet doing its bidding. The image of the Antichrist, according to Revelation 13, causes all who refuse to worship it to be killed, and the false prophet of the Antichrist will not allow people to buy or sell who refuse to worship the image of the Antichrist. The false prophet is the United States that created the image of the Antichrist, which is counterfeit Israel. Does the shoe fit? Does the false prophet of the United States impose sanctions and tariffs? Does it threaten your livelihood and your safety and your freedom if you do not worship the image of the Antichrist, and if you speak against the image of the Antichrist? Has Mossad not invaded the United States and is controlling our politicians, our legislation, even overtly saying that we need to squelch the free speech of American citizens, and training the IDF, training ICE to go out and wage war on our own people? Are they not doing exactly what is written in Daniel 11, which is to take over lands? Well, we're going to talk about in this video, and perhaps this will be split into other videos. I don't know if I'll have the time in this video to go over everything. We're going to talk about some of the things that I've been talking with you about in previous videos regarding NSPM 7, regarding the ICE raids that you're seeing, the fires in Argentina, the capture of Maduro, the agenda of NSPM 7, the history of Catholicism and feudalism, the current push for neo-feudalism, and why the United States has had so much fear over communism. Why is it that the Antichrist kingdom is so afraid of communism? So let's begin with the difference between this feudalistic mentality of the harlot Catholic Church and the prostitutes that bore out of her, of which the false prophet is one, of which the image of the Antichrist is one, and this history with communism. Because communism, or at least Russia, was largely responsible, and in part responsible, for the fall of Rome and the fall of Catholicism. So that already makes it a threat. But the ideologies of themselves are in total opposition. So let's just describe the ideologies, and you tell me what sounds a little bit more like what Christ would have advocated for. Not that Christ would have been a commie, I'm not saying that, but what sounds more like what he would have advocated for? What sounds a little more like what he taught? Feudalism was a hierarchical system based on land, lords, and serfs with obligations. Communism aims for a classless society with collective ownership. The problem here with in the conflict with what Christ would have wanted is that both systems have powerful elites controlling the masses. The key differences lie in the source of power, land versus state, ideology, and goals, maintaining hierarchy versus achieving equality. But both involve exploitation, limited freedom for the working class, with communism seeking to abolish private property entirely, unlike feudalism where some personal property existed, at least in people's imagination, because I don't think that that's actually reality. Okay, so let's break it down. So in feudalism, you have a rigid hierarchy. You have kings, lords, knights, peasants, and serfs based on land. So it's land-based with serfs tied to the land, and they work for lords in exchange for protection. And then as far as social mobility, it's very limited, and status is often inherited. In communism, they're aiming for a stateless and classless society. There's a collective and state ownership of means of production. And whereas in feudalism, land ownership, military, and personal loyalty hold the power, in communism, the state, or in theory, the collective, own the power. The part that I'm saying would be more aligned with what Christ advocated for is that communism aims for complete equality, abolishing class distinctions. That's a good part of communism. There should be no poor among you. That the rich are providing, that they're helping, that they're, as Paul said, there's supposed to be an aim for equality. I know that bothers some of you, but that's what the word says. So the major differences are in ownership. Feudalism involves lords owning land and peasants working in it. Communism involves the state representing the people owning everything. The goal is that feudalism maintains a traditional hierarchical order. Communism seeks to overthrow hierarchy for equality. And then there's control. Feudal power comes from land. Communist power comes from centralized state control, potentially creating new elites, bureaucrats. So this is a huge threat. Communism has been a huge threat. Leftist ideology, as it's being referred to right now, which is the fear that communism is going to take over. Again, if you listen to the channel, you know that I am not a political person. I do not vote. I don't care what you think about that, because the word tells me that I was never supposed to want a human king, that God is the one who sets up kings. He's the one who deposes them, and he does it based on my submission to him and returning to him. He is the one who decides what spirit is going to rule over me. There is no way that I'm going to vote out what God has already determined is going to happen. And if you think that our elections aren't interfered in and you have so much power in your vote, you're delusional. But regardless of which party wins, God decides the spirit. He's the one who decides the spirit that's going to rule over you. You are not going to outsmart God, and that includes in knowing that the Antichrist is rising and you're going to go move to the wilderness and you'll be safe. Give me a break. Now, I'm going to read an article to you that I thought was well written and explained this concept of Operation Condor and the involvement of the United States. Now, usually when you're reading about Operation Condor, historians will say, well, the United States had this involvement. Well, I mean, what's come to light in the last couple of years is that the United States has a lot more involvement than we've thought in what has gone down in different countries, and that Mossad has a lot more involvement than we ever could have imagined. And that the Harlot Catholic Church has had a lot more involvement than we could have ever thought. And actually, the word tells us that she is the mother of all prostitutes and of all the abominations in the earth. So regarding these ideologies, you need to understand that feudalism was the ideology of the Harlot Catholic Church. That is what was in control during medieval times. In Europe, the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service, and vassals were in turn tenants of the nobles, while the peasants, the serfs, were obliged to live in their lord's land and give him homage, labor, and a share of the produce nationally in exchange for military protection. This is what neo-feudalists are trying to set up. Neo-feudalism is a modern metaphorical concept describing a 21st century economic shift where massive tech corporations and global elites, the new lords, command extreme wealth and data control over a precarious, low-asset population, modern serfs. That's what we are, modern serfs, slaves, basically. Replacing land-based feudalism with digital financial dependency, corporate surveillance, and high inequality. Again, I ask you, does the shoe fit? Is that what you're seeing? I mean, first of all, are you seeing that the President of the United States fornicates with these global elites, with these massive tech corporations, giving them kickbacks, giving them, I mean, do you not see, like, what are they doing in the White House? So traditional feudalism was based on land ownership and hereditary titles. Neo-feudalism is based on control over technology, data, intellectual property, and financial assets. When I told you a while back that you were going to lose everything, when the word tells you that everything you've worked for is going to go to somebody else, when I told you a while back that there was going to be some sort of a financial crash, and that I kept hearing tech, that's what we're talking about. When I told you a while back about the SNAP benefits and how this elitist in the White House doesn't care about you, doesn't care about the poor, and that these are the first things to go, and that something was starting when he just so flippantly decided, well, we'll just take from the poor. We'll just stop providing to them. I told you something was starting. And it's not just going to affect the poor. It's going to affect the middle class. It's going to affect people who think that they have their security in their 401ks, in their pension plans, in their savings, in the things that they own. You're getting ready to not own anything. Now, there's something that NSPM 7 talks about, that it exposes in its agenda, in its ideology, in its heart. And that is that you are not allowed to speak against capitalism. Why would you not be allowed to speak against capitalism? It's an ideology. Like, whose feelings are hurt there? Well, feudalism was a rigid agrarian system. Neo-feudalism operates within a hyper-capitalist structure that has eroded the middle class. The serfs, medieval serfs, were tied to the land, providing their labor and tribute. Modern serfs are often gig workers, debt-burdened professionals. You feel that? Do you feel that, guys? Or cloud serfs who provide data and labor to digital platforms. Slaves, just another word for slaves. You know how God established this thing where, like, when people were in debt, they had a debt and they sold themselves as slaves in the Old Testament? Well, guess what? He established that for a reason, so that you would understand that American dream that you were sold was a trick. Those things you think you own, who owns them, guys? You're owned. And there is no solution for you to come out of that debt. You're owned. You have sold yourself into slavery. And this thing that I've told you about how I feel free, how I had all of this wealth at one time, and I feel free not having that anymore, not owning property and everything else, it's a sign to you. God has set me free because I was willing to give it up. Did you give up anything while I was doing all that? No, you held on to it, didn't you? And now it owns you. You thought, sucks for her that that's her covenant. Now you're going to understand. This is why, even though there's money sitting there that I could go cash in on, this is why God said, don't touch that money. Do not return to the moment. It's a trick, Carrie Ann. It's a trick. Those people that are stalking you, coming to your kid's house, saying, you have money, you have money. Unbelievable. They hire, these law firms hire private investigators to stalk you, to track you down. It's completely illegal to tell you you have money. It's a trick. I'm not returning to that slavery. Maybe you have a chance right now to go and return to God and ask him what you need to do. Go ask him what you need to do, guys. Maybe you have that opportunity. I don't know. I know you've had the opportunity this entire time that I've been going through this to go and discern, well, what is it that you require of me? Have you done it? Is this just conspiracy theory, or is this actually being implemented? Because as far as I can see, NSPM 7 is a serious document. And what we're seeing with ICE rate, serious. And what we're seeing with this, joining of global elites, serious business. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is happening. I spoke with you not that long ago about vassal states and the approach, the agenda, the ideology of the United States and Israel. Israel in particular, creating vassal states. There are also vassal people. There were vassal people in the medieval European feudal system who pledged loyalty, homage, and military service to a lord or sovereign in exchange for protection and the use of land, known as a fief. This relationship was central to social, political, and military structure, often forming a hierarchy where vassals could also be lords to their own subordinates. So you see that hierarchical structure where a vassal is receiving some sort of a reward. What does this look like in neo-feudalism, or what does it look like under the Antichrist? Because that's really what we're talking about. Well, Daniel 11 says that he's going to flatter those who have violated the covenant, but people who know their God will firmly resist him. And that he's going to, and it actually says, with flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. They're going to sell out. They're going to sell out to still be slaves and not know it, right? Just to receive a little bit of power for a little bit of time, forsake their salvation. Wonder if something like that is going on with ICE. If that's an example of being flattered, of receiving your $50,000 bonus and all your perks, but you've sold your soul to go out there and be a slave anyway. So now let's see, in this article that I want to read to you, what this actually looks like in practice, what it has looked like historically when the United States became involved in doing this, in executing this. And I want you to remember, as we're reading about this, that the atrocities that were committed in Latin America during Operation Condor, while the United States was farming out responsibility, because don't think for a second that the United States was not directing this, or that Israel wasn't involved in the 70s and 80s. It wasn't that long ago. So while you're reading historians talk about this and they're saying, oh yeah, the United States was involved, no, the United States was controlling it. They were directing the show, and Israel was likely involved. What I want you to remember is that when you start hearing these numbers of people who were imprisoned, tortured, and killed, that those numbers, as high as they are nothing compared to what you're going to see. And I want you to remember also that this plague, this fifth trumpet plague, just because it's not affecting you yet, does not mean it's not here. The word says the wise are going to understand, but the wicked will not. So not everything that God fulfills, and in fact, my experience is the majority that God of what God fulfills, if not all of it, I've had to look at much of it in hindsight to be able to understand what it is that he's doing. And then it starts to increase slowly, so that it's not something that just smacks you upside the head so that you're like, oh, this is it. This is it. It's something that you have to have the eyes to see. That's why he said, let those who have eyes to see, see. Let those who have ears to hear, hear. It's not going to smack you upside the head, right? Like these things, this military force as much as we're looking at it, we're like, my goodness, it didn't just happen overnight. But if you, and it's also not being talked about in the media, is it? No one's hearing about it. So it seems like the world's at peace, doesn't it? But if you go in and research, have ICE detentions increased just in the month of February, just since the beginning of first Passover, then you're going to see that this is increasing. Not minimally, not incrementally. It is increasing substantially. You're just not seeing it in the media. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the Mossad and the global elites are controlling media so you don't know what's going on? Their playbook is Operation Condor. And I was born towards the latter part of the 70s. And I remember my family, my parents always talking about the KGB and communism, commies. It hasn't really changed. The storybook hasn't really changed, right? Communism is the enemy. I want you to also pay attention to who they went after during Operation Condor. This wasn't a race issue. Turns out wasn't a race issue. You know, y'all get mad when I say stuff like that, like, because you're so married to your race narrative. It wasn't about race. It was about control. If you have money, your race doesn't matter. If you have power, your race doesn't matter. The word talks about advocating for, protecting, providing for the widow, the fatherless, the foreigner, the poor. It's not just about race, guys. These are those, by the way, who are most likely to be saved, not the powerful of the world. That's why God cares for them so much. None of the powerful and none of the rich are going to be saved. The word already tells you that. The rich are going to die. James made it clear. So if you're not clear about that and you're holding on to your money, first of all, you should be concerned about your salvation. Second of all, the best thing that could happen to you is that you lose it. All right, here's the article that I want to read to you. It was actually published by Ellie Pearl on July 12th, 2021. Operation Condor and the Horrors of U.S. Foreign Policy. Many in the United States view their country as a beacon of democracy, right? Everything under the guise of democracy. Same thing in Israel. As children, they're taught that America is a shining light of freedom that combats authoritarianism and oppression. However, the truth surrounding the United States can be far more sinister, and which is evidenced by Operation Condor. Through Operation Condor, the United States supported authoritarian right-wing dictatorships in South America, installing puppet leaders and orchestrating coups. What did I tell you? Farming out responsibility. These are proxies through whom they are doing their evil. The U.S. overthrew democratically elected left-wing leaders in the continent and did not come close to exemplifying a shining beacon of democracy. By the way, are you allowed to say these things? Am I allowed to say these things according to NSPM 7? No. I'm considered a domestic terrorist for telling you these things, for speaking against capitalism in the United States and anti-Christ ideology that they call Christian, that they call traditional Christian values. No, I'm a domestic terrorist. That's who they go after. They go after domestic terrorists, political opposition, ideological opposition. And this is what I've been telling you. It isn't about race. It isn't about anything other than those who refuse to violate the covenant. The people who know their God firmly resist this ideological evil. But you guys want your own narratives, don't you? You don't understand things from biblical prophecy. You don't understand what you're seeing in the world from what the Bible says. You have learned from the world how to understand what's unfolding. That's why you don't have discernment. The repression of political opposition in support of authoritarianism that the United States exhibited in South America during the latter half of the 20th century is antithetical to the ideals that the U.S. supposedly holds itself to and must be recognized. Operation Condor began under the context of the Cold War, as the defining ideals of U.S. foreign policy were to fiercely oppose communism. This fear of communism led to the domino theory, which was the idea that one country falling to communism in a region would lead to other countries in the region becoming communist, and countries would fall like dominoes in support of communism. This was the motivating belief that justified the Vietnam War, as the U.S. thought that they needed to stop the spread of communism before it overtook Southeast Asia. That was a disaster, wasn't it? And look how the United States treated their vets. Not that I'm advocating for war at all, I'm not. And I come from a family where there are a lot of vets. And my family takes a lot of pride in military, legalized murder. That's what they take pride in. This so-called moral country doesn't even take care of their own vets. They don't even take care of those who've supposedly fought for their freedom. Operation Condor was much more covert than the Vietnam War and didn't require the drafting of American men. This meant that the U.S. government didn't need to justify Operation Condor to the mass populace, as only foreign policy experts and those with family in South America knew of the operation. While the domino theory was not used as much in Condor, there are still strong similarities between the Vietnam War and Operation Condor. All right, so I just want to point something out to you, because as this fifth plague is coming, or is here, and is unfolding, you may not have the same narrative in the United States as you have in Latin America or other parts of the globe. It may unfold differently. In Argentina, for example, right now, Israeli settlers are burning down Argentina. They're literally settlers there, causing fires, and then buying up land at a cheaper price. It's not happening that way in the United States, right? So you need not rely on your own understanding and think that things need to happen exactly the same all throughout the world. But it is coming from the same source. And these governments have made themselves vassal states to Mossad. So even the elites aren't actually in power. They're slaves to Assyria. So Operation Condor was much more covert than the Vietnam War and didn't require the drafting of American men. This meant that the U.S. government didn't need to justify Operation Condor to the mass populace, as only foreign policy experts and those with family in South America knew of the operation. While the domino theory was not used as much in Condor, there are still strong similarities between the Vietnam War and Operation Condor. The prime parallel between Vietnam and Condor is that in both instances, extrajudicial killings and human rights abuses were committed under the name of repression of communism. Right? And as long as you can say repression of communism, that it's okay to do anything, right? It's okay to murder. Same thing with if you're a terrorist, it's okay to murder you. In fact, we celebrate it. Operation Condor started in 1968 with U.S. General Robert Porter's comments. In order to facilitate the coordinated employment of internal security forces within and among Latin American countries, we are endeavoring to foster inter-service and regional cooperation by assisting in the organization of integrated command and control centers, the establishment of common operating procedures, and the conduct of joint and combined training exercises. Say it in English, dude. You're sending military over there. You're in charge of it. Don't talk about cooperation. You're pulling the strings. And your training exercises include imprisoning, torturing, and murdering political dissent. That's what's going on there. All that fluffy language. Because that's exactly what they did. If you wanted to do something noble, you'd be able to just lay out the plan of what you were doing. We're going in there. We're going to establish a government that works for the people, that is not dictatorial, that does not oppress them. We're going to empower the people, but that's not what you're doing. That's not what the United States has ever done, because they don't want anyone to be empowered. Otherwise, that would take away from their own power. So they go in and destabilize these other countries and put them in a worse position. And then but we'll give you US AID, right? And then we'll revoke it. We'll just take it. Like for no reason, we'll just take it after we've destabilized you. USAID was never given to these countries to actually help them. It was to keep them dependent and to continue to maintain the power of the United States. Any more than the money that Mossad pays our politicians is intended to help us. No, it's intended to keep us dependent and at their behest. As a response to rising left-wing ideologies within Latin America in 1975, Paraguay, Brazil, Bolivia, Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina joined forces with the goal to eliminate socialists, guerrillas, and any political dissidents. Thankfully, my family got out of there in the 60s, because just as they were leaving, this was going on. Ecuador and Peru later joined the operation. The casualties from the operation are staggering and atrocious. It's estimated that there were 60 to 80,000 deaths in South America due to Condor, along with 400,000 political prisoners captured and no doubt tortured. Operation Condor utilized kidnappings, assassinations, and state-sanctioned terrorism. The most egregious example of this state-sanctioned terrorism was the assassination of Orlando Letelier, which was committed in Washington, D.C. and resulted in the death of an American citizen. Orlando Letelier was a former ambassador to the U.S. and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Interior, and Defense under Chilean President Salvador Allende. Allende was a socialist who was deposed due to a military coup led by CIA-backed Augusto Pinochet. Following this coup, Letelier was brutally tortured by Pinochet's forces for a year before being released, which led Letelier to move to the U.S. Once in the U.S., Letelier, I'm stumbling over that, it's not easy for me to say, Letelier ardently opposed Pinochet and the Chicago Boys, a group of disciples of Milton Friedman, the father of modern free market capitalism. The Chicago Boys were tasked with redesigning Chile's economy and transformed it from a socialist economy to an extremely free market capitalist economy. Letelier's opposition to Pinochet and his free market reforms led Pinochet taking action. On the 21st of September 1976, Letelier and his American colleague Ronnie Moffett were assassinated via a car bomb in Washington, D.C. The car bomb was planted by DINA, Pinochet's secret police, which included Michael Townley, an American expatriate. Documents released in 2015 demonstrate that the CIA knew that Pinochet organized the bombing. The assassination itself exemplifies that the American support of anti-communist leaders like Augusto Pinochet led to state-ordered murders of U.S. citizens on American soil. Let me read that again. The assassination itself exemplifies that the American support of anti-communist leaders like Augusto Pinochet led to state-ordered murders of U.S. citizens on American soil. So the United States, this isn't a new thing, the United States has not cared about its own citizens any more than Israel cares about its own citizens. It will allow the USS Liberty to be shot at, our men, our guys, to be shot at, to be murdered in cold blood. If you're wondering why they don't care about vets, they don't care about those who are actively in service. They don't care. If they don't care about our men who are putting their lives out on the line, do you think they care about you? They don't have loyalty to anyone. State-ordered murders of U.S. citizens on American soil. The biggest foreign policy misunderstanding that the U.S. held surrounding Operation Condor that led to the awful effects of Operation Condor was their binary view on communism, socialism, and other left-wing ideologies. The U.S. viewed communism and socialism as a direct threat to capitalism. NSPM 7, not allowed to speak against capitalism. You're not allowed to question the power that they worship, the ideological structure that keeps them in power. You are not allowed to speak against that. Why? Why do you think? Whose feelings is that hurting to talk against an ideology? No, what you're doing is threatening, and that's exactly what communism does. And so if you speak against that, you're going to be called a communist or you're going to be called a terrorist. The U.S. viewed communism and socialism as a direct threat to capitalism, which is true, but in turn was also a direct threat to freedom, which is more debatable. The U.S. then viewed anyone who stood against communism as a fighter of freedom, right? This is what that puffed up plastic face Kristi Noem says. They're doing God's work. The ICE is doing God's work. They're fighting against terrorists. They're fighting against the commies. The U.S. then viewed anyone who stood against communism as a fighter of freedom. So yeah, they're being flattered. Of course they're being flattered. without understanding that a free market economy does not necessitate a free society. Pinochet's Chile is the best example of this. Without any opposition in Chile, due to the state's purging of political dissidents, the Chicago Boys were able to transform Chile into a radically free market economy. Milton Friedman referred to these laissez-faire reforms as the miracle of Chile. And while the Chilean markets were extremely free, the state itself was not free. It is estimated that 3,000 to 10,000 political dissidents were killed under Pinochet, with thousands being kidnapped by the secret police. Pinochet was supported by the U.S. Supported by the U.S.? I think it was probably a little bit more than, we support you, right? Pretty sure that Pinochet was a vassal of the U.S. Pinochet was supported by the U.S., especially the CIA, due to the fact that he fought against socialist Salvador Allende's regime. Now, if you think that, this is conspiracy theory that you're saying that the U.S. was pulling the strings, what do they do with, in Venezuela? What were they using Maria Corina Machado? How are they using her? Was she supported by the U.S. or was she a vassal of the U.S. and Israel? Come on. I mean, she was speaking about Venezuela as a woman who's essentially opening her legs to everyone and has all of these resources. She's a sexy woman. She just wants to give you all of her resources. She's a prostitute. That's what she was saying. Pinochet was supported by the U.S., especially the CIA, due to the fact that he fought against socialist Salvador Allende's regime. This is essentially what she was saying. Oh, we got to fight against the regime of Maduro, right? The U.S. couldn't understand that just because someone is capitalist doesn't mean they aren't also authoritarian, and that social and political freedom is not inherent to a capitalist society. Do you guys hear that? The U.S. couldn't understand that just because someone is capitalist doesn't mean they aren't also authoritarian, and that social and political freedom is not inherent to a capitalist society. Do you guys understand that? About you guys calling yourself MAGA, do you understand that? Let me read it again. MAGA doesn't understand that just because someone is capitalist doesn't mean that they aren't also authoritarian, and that social and political freedom is not inherent to a capitalist society. You're going to find out. The other explanation is that the U.S. knew that Pinochet was authoritarian from the onset, but because he slaughtered left-wing political dissidents, they were okay with supporting him. Right? Just like in any other situation, they would be calling Bukele. Why are they not calling him a terrorist? That's kind of odd. Instead of calling him a terrorist, the U.S. sends their prisoners over there to be terrorized. It's okay as long as it fits their political ideology, as long as it fits their political agenda. And then they call it God's work, right? Like, that's what Kristi Noem says. That's what Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt says. As long as they have the image of the cross around their neck, I guess it's Christian, right? Even though God said don't set up an image, right? As long as you have an image tattooed on your body like Hexeth, I guess it's Christian. Long as you can see that image, guys, right? Then you feel comfortable because you know that image connects you, right? I have news for you. Not if you're a Christian. And by the way, God told you not to get a tattoo. How much more disgusting is it to tattoo an image that you claim to be a tribute to him? What do you think, that's a gift to him? You think that's an offering? Operation Condor is incredibly recent history for the United States and demonstrates the horrors that the U.S. has had a hand in across the globe. Again, I say to you, I don't think it's just that we had a hand in it. I think we had both hands in. But I think what our hands were doing, were puppeteering, farming out responsibility, using our proxies. That way no one knows that no one is the wiser as to what's really in our hearts, right? The Catholicism, by the way, does the same thing. Catholicism just allows these different parishes, just do what you want. Yeah, the Pope is the vicar of God, but what he says is just a suggestion. Each of you do what you want. And that way, when they're committing atrocities, when they're doing things, they can say, but that's an anomaly. It's an anomaly. This just occurred in this parish, or this just occurred with this priest. It's a deflection strategy so as not to bring attention on the evil that you're committing. Oh, just send them to another place. What language do they speak? French? Okay, send them to Canada. Oh, they abused more children? Okay, send them to another place. The U.S.'s involvement in the kidnapping of political prisoners and the assassinations of professors, politicians, and other left-wing luminaries is entirely antithetical to the beliefs that supposedly fuel the United States. The U.S.'s obsession with free market capitalism and unequivocal hatred of communism led to the state being willing to look past incredibly dramatic human rights abuses. The U.S. must look to rectify their past mistakes regarding Operation Condor and look at the leaders they support with much more nuance and criticism. Now, here's where I think that this writer is naive. This is the heart of the United States. You assume that the United States has some altruistic motive, that they would care, that they would want to do good. This has been the heart of the United States this entire time. In its colonization, right? Oh, excuse me, in establishing territories. Oh, we use different language then. That way we don't look too much like the atrocities of Catholicism, but it's the same thing. Oh, in the name of Christianizing, that's what the Harlot Catholic Church did. Oh, we do it in the name of what? Democracy. This has been the heart of the United States. Why are we pretending like it's not? This is the heart of its ideology. This is the heart of its behavior. It's the heart of what it does, of its agenda. And you're hearing about that in NSPM 7, so pay attention. That is the heart of what is going to go out, of what is being executed right now. So I think that it's naive. This statement is naive. The U.S. must look to rectify their past. They are not motivated for that. Must look to rectify their past mistakes regarding Operation Condor and look at the leaders that they support with much more nuance and criticism. They're not getting better. They're getting worse. That should tell you something about the heart. They are not motivated for this. If this doesn't happen, the U.S. is doomed to repeatedly support regimes that commit the same atrocities that happened. What do you mean support regimes? They build those regimes. They install those regimes in order to maintain their own power, that commit the same atrocities that happened in Latin America during Operation Condor. Listen, this is their playbook. This is the playbook. It's a very well-written article. I don't mean to criticize the author. I just think he's naive and hopeful about, the saying, when people tell you who they are, believe them. Why are you going to have hope about the devil that he's going to change? This is his heart. This is his tactic. These are his strategies. This is his playbook. And it's not going to change. And this is the playbook that is acting out right now. So let me be clear about what happened during Operation Condor. Military went out into the streets and kidnapped all political dissidents, all political opponents. Let me put it in NSPM language for you. All those who are anti-capitalist, who are domestic terrorists, who are anti-Christian, anti-traditional Christian. So what they're saying is not that you are anti-Christian, it is that you are anti-Christ. Because traditional Christian values are anti-Christ. That's what they're saying. Normative so-called Christian values here in the United States, that is anti-Christ. So for a person like me to be telling you it is anti-Christ to set up an image, it is anti-Christ to worship Israel, to worship the false prophet of the United States, I am a domestic terrorist. Because what I am speaking is anti-normative so-called Christian. This is the system that they're trying to set up here. They want a neo-feudalistic system in which these global elites are governing you, are enslaving and oppressing you. They're going to take everything that you have. That American dream that you think you're sitting on, it's going to be ripped from under your butt. You're not going to have anything. I read it to you. I read it to you in the last day or so. I think I read it to you yesterday. That O Haliba, Jerusalem, that's supposed to be you. Everything that you have worked for is going to be taken from you. That you are worse than your prostitute sister that's been slaughtered in Gaza. At least your prostitute sister in Gaza understands and accepts the concept of martyrdom. You don't even think you have to endure that. You're not preparing for anything. that I've been warning you about the last 4 years. So this is what you're going to go into. This is what is going to continue to increase. This is what you're going to see. And I mean, this isn't conspiracy theory. This is already what has been implemented. The only thing I'm telling you is this is going to get worse. And those of you thinking that this is just about race, you got another thing coming. And not only that, but the word tells us that this is going to come on its own kingdom. So actually, those who worship it. So it's not just about political opposition. That's the plague. So for some of you who are actually looking for the plague, you're looking to see, like, well, where is this? I want you to understand that over the time that I've been speaking to you and I've told you these are the things that are going to happen, it always occurs this way, where we're looking in hindsight and I'm saying, this is what I told you was going to happen. It is happening. This is how it's happening. I don't want you to lose hope and think, oh, it's not happening. It was a false alarm. When is it going to happen? It's already here and it's increasing. And just because you're not hearing about it in the media, you need to understand who's controlling media. They stated their agenda. They have a history of enacting this agenda. This is what you're seeing right now. And it is increasing. So see, here's part of the thing as well, is that you're not going to hear about it. The media isn't going to offer this up to you because they're bought. There are a few independents who are going to speak about certain things, like the Gray Zone. The Gray Zone is an excellent resource. They just did actually an episode on Operation Condor. They did an interview with an Argentine political author, scholar. His name is Atilia Boron. And he said something that was very interesting at the end of this interview. Very interesting, very prophetic, and very chilling. What he said is that when these things happen, so he talks about Operation Condor, he talks about the similarities of what's happening right now, they talk about neo-feudalism, and what he says at the very end of this interview is this is the time when messiahs start to appear. This is also the time when violent leaders start to appear. And he said the world does not need that. But that's exactly what the word says is going to happen as well. Don't rely on your own understanding, guys. We read the Bible, we have an idea of what's going to happen, because obviously if we're relating with it, we have to have some sort of an idea. But then we have to keep going back to the Spirit. We have to keep asking God, am I understanding this correctly? And he's going to lead us to understand, and he's going to lead us to research the things that need to be researched, just like me plugging in, okay, here's what I've understood from the Spirit about how this is going to look. Now I'm going to go look for it. Is this plague of ice increasing since first Passover happened? Yes, it is. And it's increasing substantially. You have to be led by the Spirit or you're going to get entangled in all of those conspiracy theories that are false. You're going to get distracted. But again, are you going to heed the warning? Are you going to return to God? Are you going to go and do those things? Go do it then. Go return to him. Ask him if what I'm saying is true. This 5 months of torture that is being described in Revelation 9 in the fifth trumpet may be 5 months rolled out. So it may roll out over 5 months. I don't know what it's going to look like. I have to continue to receive that from God, and I'm not going to speak on something he hasn't revealed to me. But this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm seeing happening. This is what historically has been the playbook of the United States in other nations. Why wouldn't they do this to their own nation? Why wouldn't they repeat the same strategy if it worked? And oh, they are. Come to think of it, they are repeating that same strategy. What do you need to do right now? Do you need to go obsess on this in the news? No, you need to go and return to God. You need to ask him if what I'm saying is true. You need to ask him, what do I need to be doing right now? Go do that.